Hello GRC community, and welcome to another video tutorial to help you get started with ServiceNow's applications. My name is Eric Ferron in Santa Clara, California, and first I want to wish you all well in these uncertain times. I hope that you're all safe and in good health. Today with me is Anne-Marie Fernandez, who is a Principal Education Advisor and a GRC specialist who is contracting with ServiceNow. Hello, Anne-Marie. I hope you're well.
Hello, Eric. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here with you all today. And yes, thank you. I am well and looking forward to this tutorial.
All right. Glad to hear this, Anne-Marie. So many of you will already know Anne-Marie since you may have taken some GRC training classes with her, like I did. And today, Anne-Marie is with us to tell us all about audit with ServiceNow GRC application. So, Anne-Marie, why do we want to talk about audit and how we're going to approach this today?
So audit is essentially where everything comes together. We get to see where all our hard work that we put into setting up our GRC, and now it's time to reap those benefits.
All right, so here's our program today. We're going to go through some quick refreshers like we always do. We're going to be defining what the audits are, and then Anne-Marie is going to give us more details and refinements. We're going to get more into the weeds. Then Anne-Marie is going to give us a demonstration on how to use audits in ServiceNow, and we'll conclude with the main takeaways and, as usual, the things to do right now at the end of the tutorial. So let me get us started quickly with a couple of refresher slides. As usual, this tutorial is part of the Get Started with GRC series, so really aimed at people and organizations in the early stages of implementation. We want to make sure you have the knowledge and tools to quickly realize value from the product. In the future, we'll also have more tutorials for the more advanced people and organizations. This will come later. You may have seen this rather comprehensive slide before. We're not going to go into detail on this slide. It's been published in the community forums. It aims at showing the totality of the GRC modules and how they are linked together. So this slide really gives a useful map of your application with the most important concepts. Now, everything, of course, leads sooner or later to an audit. All the way on the right side here, the audit engagement box, and Anne-Marie is going to show us how. So this is also a slide that you've seen before. We've used this conceptual format in the tutorials around controls, around entities, and around indicators, and also about compliance scoring. So this is really the overall structure that we are creating inside of the GRC application. And my understanding, and Anne-Marie is going to confirm this, is that the audit is going to let us know whether we are doing a good job at doing what we say that we are doing. And now Anne-Marie is going to take us through exactly what an audit is in ServiceNow.
So in short, an audit is an independent assessment of the evidence of whether a given entity in an organization is compliant with applicable authorities and internal policies. Let's break that down a little bit. So the audit, whether carried by an internal or external auditor, should be impartial, and the conclusions should be objective, not being swayed by any member of the management or the organization. So by being a separate scoped app in ServiceNow, you have the compliance, the risk, and the audit. Audit is its own scoped app that ensures segregation of duty. So you have roles for compliance, you have roles for risk, you have roles for auditors. Auditors will have their own roles. They can see some data, but not all. Why? So as evidence-based, the conclusions of the audit should be arrived at in a very rational way and should not only be reliable, but reproducible. So the only way that that is really possible for the audit process to be systematic and based on evidence is to use that template design. So while the template approach might seem cumbersome in the setup process, it really supports the audit in ServiceNow, supports this idea by design. Your control objectives, your entities, your control tests, all that is templatized, which makes it systematic. So our goal here is not to make everybody's life miserable, but to manage risk and identify the areas of operational improvement New areas of risk, keep your company out of the news or jail, identify any new controls that are being published, and to keep up with emerging trends. So such as the big move of companies of going to the cloud. It will help you understand whether or not you can manage the risks associated to moving to the cloud.
All right. So really a very useful tool to stay out of trouble. All right. So tell us a little bit more about possible best practices and how they translate into the ServiceNow world.
Yeah, so I wanted to give you a snippet into the mind of an auditor. So there's an old ISO auditor saying that says, say what you do what you say, and prove that you have done it. Now let's try breaking that down a little bit and mirror that with the various functions in ServiceNow GRC. So one, is everyone following the policy today, right? We know that everything starts from policy. And also, are we sure that everyone is aware? Right below policy is the control objective, which is what are those specific things that we operationally have to do in order to support that policy? So for example, if your policy is manage access, then we need to understand if people are following that policy for each system, right? And then for each area. So this middle area is what makes ServiceNow so special, so different, but also so effective, because we take those control objectives and we scope it out to each of those entities. So you have a control for HR and you have a control for finance. But let's not stop there, because we need to prove that we are doing what we are saying on an ongoing basis. And that's why we have those indicators. So lastly, it's verify, right? In the audit area, the auditor is verifying that the top two levels are running effectively. So we trust that it's working well or working effectively. And now we are going to verify. We're going to look at the indicator results from layer 2, and we're going to run our own independent control tests. So what exactly happens in an audit in ServiceNow? In an audit, there are some prep steps and activities in addition to looking at policies, procedures, and looking at evidence. I want to clarify that in ServiceNow, an audit is also called an engagement. So essentially, they are synonymous. And the reason why is because it's almost like a little project, right? So you're engaging certain tasks and certain folks within this engagement or audit. So there are startup activities for the team. So the auditor may be asking to corroborate procedures and interview employees, asked to walk through a process, or any other general activities. The control test is the independent test that the auditor is running. Then there's the evidence, right? So they'll want to look at past evidence. This is the beauty of indicators. If you had set them up on a schedule all year long on a monthly basis, that data will be there. That's the utopian dream, that if an auditor ever stepped into your company, you basically say, here, everything is ready for you to look at. So you specify the dates that you are auditing, essentially. So when you set up your audit, basically you're saying a date in the past. In this case, let's just say we are auditing Q1. So when you set up those dates in the audit, it will only pull in the indicator results for January, February, March. You might have more than that, because if you've had GRC for a while, you might have a lot of indicator results. By setting your audit dates, you're only pulling in those indicator results which are pertinent to the period that you're auditing. Then when all the field work is done, essentially you're going to log all your issues, write down any findings or observations that came out of that audit, and then you produce an audit report.
Well, thank you very much for that. So this is great, but I suspect things can get a little more complicated. I'd like to start this conversation about the details and refinements by showing this slide that we've used in previous tutorials. The tutorials that are at the bottom of the slide here: controls tutorials, the compliance scoring tutorial, and the indicators tutorial. All these links will be available in the PDF version of the slides available in the community forum. And I think, Anne-Marie, you're going to tell us about the control test, which is one of the 5 steps in the life cycle of a control. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
All right, let's move on to control tests.
So a control test is a test of a control. Seems obvious, but when you think about it, you're performing a test to confirm the efficiency and effectiveness of a control. So think of it as a test plan, like test steps. Your team performs particular steps regularly, but the auditor doesn't know your systems and they don't know how to necessarily verify things in your environment. So you'll need to write test steps or control steps, and they will go ahead and follow those steps in the test plan and see if they come up with the same result that you do. In short, they can't go into the systems, pull access logs, but if you lay out the steps on how you do it, they can follow it, actually run through it, and see if the results are satisfactory. So the question they're answering is what you are doing reproducible? This will tell them that if there's consistency in your process and that there's evidence to support that.
Very cool. So how do we generate a control test?
Yep, so we'll have a demo shortly, but the main thing to illustrate here is that control tests have 3 lives. So the control test essentially follows that template approach that we've seen on policy compliance and risk. So first, the test is defined at the control objective layer. Makes sense, right? So that's applicable to the entire company. Then we will define the test plans for each of the entities or for each of the controls. Then when it comes time to audit, we may not run every single test plan, but just the ones that we want to run for that audit, depending on what you're auditing at that time. So we will generate control tests from those test plans. We'll demo this in just a second.
Okay, let's move on to refinement number 2.
Yes, so there's 2 main types of audits that ServiceNow is geared towards, and that's external audits and internal audits. So I just wanted to pause and talk about each one really quickly. So external audits are commonly performed by certified public accounting firms and result in an auditor's opinion, which is included in an audit report. Audits can include both financial and as well as a company's internal controls. Typically with external audits, you want to be very careful about the information that you provide. You want to answer the external auditor's question and no more. That's contrasted with an internal audit. So internal audits serve more as a managerial tool to make improvements, catch any inconsistencies before an external auditor comes in, and also confirm that the internal controls are effective before anything goes wrong. Just for clarification, ServiceNow is geared more towards internal audits, but they can support external audits efficiently.
And the last refinement for today?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give you a flavor of some of the use cases that we've seen with audit. Not all audit implementations are alike, and there's not really what we would call a best practice in this area. But I can tell you what we've seen with customers and things that they have successfully implemented. Obviously, there's the full internal audit where you pull in all the risk and controls, you pull in all the control tests and do a full audit end to end. I've seen customers maybe just use a partial audit and use the audit module to facilitate maybe a resource heavy or repeatable process that can be very time consuming, right? So think of user access list reviews that involve several people and involves taking a lot of time tracking the evidence collection process. So that's what we call sort of a partial audit. Then the third and more simpler version that I've seen customers do successfully, maybe they did a full audit outside of ServiceNow, but they want to use ServiceNow to track their findings. So they'll just use the issue portion of audit and track those findings to ensure that they are making headway and resolving findings that came out of an audit.
Right, and I think we're going to see all of this in action in a little demo just now, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So what are we going to see in the demo?
Assuming that you've got your control set up, you've got your risk set up, we've got some indicators in play and the results are being collected, and assume that you've got your test templates set up at the control objective layer. We're going to start with creating an engagement. We're going to select the entities because in audit, everything comes together and we start with the entities, not the entity types. Then we're going to select the test plans and generate the control tests that we want the auditors to run. And then we'll add a couple of control audit activities just to see what it would look like. And then close the audit. And then we'll take a look at what an audit report looks like out of the box.
Okay.
All right, guys, so we're going to create an engagement or audit. In ServiceNow, we call it an engagement. But first, we got to confirm that all the records have been set up, right? So as an auditor, what you're doing is confirming that the set of internal controls is working effectively. So let's take a look at, look under the hoods and see what's been set up before the auditor had shown up. So here's a control objective. And in this case, we're going to be doing a audit, a partial audit. So this case, we're going to be looking at elevated admin role review across the company. So what that means is we're going to be looking at all the SOX processes. For this company, we have 20 areas that we need to ensure are compliant. So there's the general in-scope application and all these various processes here. There are 20 SOX processes, so there are 20 controls. So the other thing that we want to take a look at is what other things have been set up here. So the two of the key things that I want to point out here is one, that it supports an internal policy. I'm not going to go there right now, but you can see that it supports a policy. Then you can also see that you've got your indicator templates here. Indicator templates, these are going to be your evidence collection helpers. So there are two templates, two types of tasks that are created, and they're templates. What that means is that these are tasks that can be reused by any one of these entities down here. We'll take a look at that in just a second. So this is collecting evidence on an ongoing basis. Then there's these test templates. Now, test templates, remember we said that control test in an audit has 3 lives. Well, the first time you'll see it here is at the control objective layer. So you'll see one test template that can be run during an audit. Now, so this is for preparing for the audit. And these indicator templates are creating tasks to collect evidence on an ongoing basis. Let's take a look at this control here this control objective at the accounts payable area. So for the accounts payable area, you can see that they've got the 2 indicators that were created and they are actually running. So 2 tasks are being sent out to Manny McDonald in order to support this control objective. And there is not yet a test plan, but since it was created at the template level, I can go ahead and add it here. So simply by adding it like that. Now, the reason why you choose to add it instead of automatically adding it is because maybe not area would have the same test plan. So you may have 2 or 3 flavors available, but only run the ones that are applicable for your particular area. All right, so you've got your indicators running, and you can see, let's pull one up. So this indicator, as I mentioned, will be sending out tasks. And in this case, you can see it sending out tasks on a semi-annual basis. And I ran this one. I manually executed it just a little bit ago. So you can see there's an indicator task. So theoretically, Manny McDonald would get this task 2 times a year, and she would see the instructions here, follow it, and you can see it's been passed and closed. So this is all data that's been collected ahead of time. All right, so that's the indicator, the tasks that are running here, and then the results. So this is the result of when this task closed, it created a result. So in this case, it was a past result. All right, so indicators are collecting data, and then test plans are created at the template level. Let's take a look at them at this control level. They're called test plans, right? Test templates at control objective, test plans at each of the controls. So if we go to another area, so let's take a look at revenue recognition, SOX process. You can see that the 2 indicators are also running for their area, which means Mandy McDonald's the owner here as well. So she'll be getting the same 2 tasks, but for revenue recognition, not accounts payable. And then we're also going to bring a task plan in here. So there's one set up, and we're going to say, yep, this test plan makes sense. For when I get audited, this is a test plan that the auditor can run. All right, so you've got your controls. Remember, for the controls, you could also have risks associated with it. So let's just go ahead and add a couple risks. This control is intended to mitigate these two risks here. So that's just how you add it. Now let's go and actually create an engagement now that we have all that set up. So now let's go to audit. Here you'll see the workbench. You can see all the audits that are in play, but let's just go ahead and create a new one. So in this case, let's just say we're going to do partial SOX audit, and we're going to say elevated access review for, you could say for the 3 entities. So let's just say 3 entities. All right, so we're going to assign it to Manny McDonald. I already know that Manny McDonald has the right audit roles. Now, these 2 fields here are really key. So this is the audit period and end date. These should always be dates in the past because you're going to be auditing a period in the past. So the system does not enforce it, but essentially these dates are what is going to define the indicator results that will be shown. And let me show that for you in just a second. So let me just go ahead and save that information there. And then now you can see that you've got a couple things. You'll see entities, risks, controls, test plans, indicator results, audit tasks, and so on and so forth. So one of the things that I like to call out is that all that work that you had done in the beginning, so pre-audit, so in the policy compliance and risk area, the first thing that you're going to do is select your entities here. So not your entity types, but the individual entities which are associated to a particular control and risk. So once you select the entities, all the risks and controls associated to that entity will be brought in. Any test plans that had been associated to those entities will also be brought in, and the indicator results for those entities in this period will be brought in, just like we saw in the slide earlier. Now the audit essentially starts here. So these are the audit tasks that are going to be run, and then these are any issues. So if any of the control tasks fail, those issues would show here, but you can also create additional issues as well, or findings as a result of conducting this audit. All right, so let's go ahead and start the audit. So it starts in scope. We're going to select the entities, so we're scoping it out, right? So let's pick accounts payable. We also will pick the in-scope apps because we know that control objective, those are one of the SOX processes. And then, so no, we'll just stick with that. All right. So that's what we call scoping it out. Now what we want to do is validate. So we'll hit validate. So what we're going to be seeing is immediately it will bring in all the risks and controls associated to these 2 entities. So there are a lot. And we can see the one that we were looking at as well. So the control we were looking at was SOX ISO 4. ISA 4. And then you can see there's test plans created here as well. And then indicator results. So we picked a period in time that these results were created. So I generated these earlier, so it picked those up. All right, so that's all set up, that's brought up in the engagement. So the auditor has that information ready for them to look at. Now, what's actually run in an audit. So remember I said it starts here. All right, so those test plans were set up, remember, at the control objective layer, and we want the auditor to run the test plans. Now, the auditor might not run all of them. It's a partial audit, so they're just going to be running the ones associated to the control objective we were just looking at. So let's just see if we can find it. It was ISA 04. And so those are the test plans that are created, one for accounts payable and one for in-scope apps. So this is where the magic happens. So you're going to select those test plans. We're not running them all. We're only doing a partial audit. So we're going to hit Generate Control Tests because the auditor is going to be looking at this tab on. I'm going to hit Generate Control Tests. So we'll give it a second. And so now we can see the audit tasks generated from those test plans. So the auditor can go in here and run those control tests. So in the control test, essentially what the auditor has to do is look at the design of the test and specify, is the way that they designed this test effective or not effective? Or when they actually run through the operational steps, did they get the same result that the control owners did, right? Or yeah, so they can mark it as effective or ineffective there. All right, so essentially I'm just going to say the operation is effective and the design was also effective. And when I close this will mark it as a pass. All right, so let me just assign someone here and update that. All right, so that's really what happens in an audit. So remember the control, the control tests are what's run in an audit. They're generated from test plans. The test plans were initially associated to particular controls, right? So we set them up at the control objective layer. All right, so I was just kind of reviewing that again. All right, so that's really it. You can see, how the control objective turned into test plan, and then a control test. Let's go back to that engagement. So when you want the auditor to start, so you may continue to add additional test plans for the auditor to run. When they're running them, you could just move it to field work. All right. Now, remember I also had mentioned that an audit is sort of like a mini project. So you can add additional tasks. So you may want to schedule just a generic control test here. You may schedule an interview or walkthrough. Let's just go ahead and select a walkthrough. So you can see they'll have who they want to observe a process, right? Who is going to be leading them through that, what the steps are. You may put in the SOP or standard operating procedure that you're verifying, and you would assign it to someone that will be participating in that. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and submit that task. And here is where you just start to build out under this tab here, essentially are all the tasks that need to happen in this audit, thus called the audit tasks. Now, if one of the control tests fail, so we've got one control test here, let's assign it to Mandy as well. And maybe she said the design of this control test was fine, but when she actually ran this test, it didn't pass, right? So there were folks that had access but didn't look like they should have. So she's just going to mark it as ineffective. And we're going to go ahead and close this and update that task there. So because that failed, there was a control test issue generated here. And you can see it basically says that the in-scope application has an indicator failure. So if we take a look at that there, you can see that the control test failed. All right, so now that field work is done, You can request approval. I'm not going to add an approval here, so we'll go straight to follow-up. I'm just going to skip that state, and then you can see here, you can select a report template. So there's a default report template. Obviously, you can go and edit that and create your own, and you can also publish it to a specific database. So I'm just going to pick a GRC database. Now, once you add those in and hit save, you'll see that there's now a button called Generate Report. So let's go ahead and hit that. And now you can see the audit report there. So obviously this can be modified. It's just pulling in all the data and all the issues, the objectives here. All right, so there we go. That's it. I hope you enjoyed that demo. Let me know if you have any questions.
Well, thank you for this, Anne-Marie. So if we were to try to summarize, what are the main takeaways from this tutorial?
Yeah, so remember everything starts with entities, not entity type. We already have our controls and risks associated to entities. So now we're going to pick the entities and the system will bring in all the controls and risks associated to that. And then the other key thing is that audits are always looking at a period in the past. And that period that we define in our audit will select the specific indicators that will be available for review. So that, in essence, should make your job a lot easier come audit time.
All right. So we're now coming to the end of this tutorial. Anne-Marie, what would you recommend our audience, people who are viewing this tutorial, do right now, like in the next hour after they've finished watching this tutorial?
Yeah, so in the next hour, I recommend that you take the free audit class on Now Learning. So it's got a lot of good information in terms of the tables, the class structure, just some really good implementation level information. Then go ahead and create an engagement in either your company instance or in a developer instance if you have one. Create an engagement and generate a control test. Definitely ask questions of the community. It's a great place to get information and see what other folks have asked as well.
All right. Well, we are now at the end of the tutorial. Anne-Marie, thank you very much for your time and for your expertise. Just a couple of reminders before we close off. So, of course, the PDF version of the slides will be available in the forum. You will have questions, and as Anne-Marie says, the community forums are there to provide answers, and they are open 24/7, and they are free. Everybody loves a free answer. And the very, very last slide, we've seen it in other tutorials. I want to bring it here to make sure that people know that it exists and they can print it out. We're not going to go through this slide. This is really meant to be printed out of the PDF version of the slides. This slide captures all or most of the very important concepts for GRC, and it indicates with a little red arrow where audit sits in this overall universe. And on these words, Anne-Marie, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And to our audience, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.